Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to a brand new episode of Boss Babes. I'm your host, Brittany Baldi here, back at it again with another amazing episode. And today's special guest is actually a New England Patriots alumni, and his name is Max Lane, and he grew up in a really small town called Norborne, Missouri. I had to make sure that I asked him ahead of time how
Yep.
to say that town name correctly. So,
You sound like
welcome, Max. How are you?
you sound like a local.
Did I sound like a local a little bit? So Max actually grew up in a small town called Norborne, Missouri, with a population of only 700 people. So Max, I need to ask you, what was it like growing up in such a small town in Missouri?
It was. I loved it. It was just there wasn't. You knew everybody. I guess that's a good thing. It's a good and a bad thing because you could get in trouble because you knew everybody. So if you weren't a good kid, it would be easy to figure out that who was causing the mischief around town if you messed up. But most of the time, it was a good thing to know everybody. School wise, sports wise, there was a lot of community support for all the school activities. I don't know. It was just definitely a different way of life. I love going back there, taking my kids back there because them growing up out here in Massachusetts, they get to see a different way of life back there.
And I understand that back home where you're from in Missouri, it's kind of like a farm country. Again, having
Oh
it
yeah.
be such a small town with only 700 people, I can only imagine there's a lot of farmlands there.
My dad actually, what he did for a living was he owned his own business delivering gas and diesel fuel to farmers in the area. So he would drive a tank wagon truck that could carry up to 2,000 gallons of fuel, and he would just drive through the countryside. And a lot of times for me as a young kid growing up, I would go ride with him, like on Saturdays whenever we didn't have school and whatnot. And so I think from doing that is like I have this kind of, I like to drive. I like to go on road trips because I think because I grew up kind of like riding through the countryside with my dad on his deliveries. But then I have a sister that's married to a cattle farmer that lives outside my hometown. So lots of farm, lots of connections, to all that stuff. A lot of
I think
buddies that are still in farming and everything like that.
I think that's super amazing that it sounds like your dad was heavily involved in the farming in one way or the other. Did you
Yep.
ever farm when you were a kid? Like, did you guys have your own little garden when you were younger, or did you guys plant your own soybeans? Because I understand that where you grew up is the soybean capital of the world, according
Yeah.
to you.
I mean, we did not grow soybeans. I mean, my mom had a pretty big garden back in the day that I would, maybe help her as a kid. But no, we didn't grow any major crops like that. No, I mean I had like summer jobs where I would like chop weeds out of bean fields, soybean fields. That was one of the jobs. So I guess that's kind of considered farming, but it wasn't. Throw hay bales, like stack. You would take in hay bales and you would go through this pasture, this like wheat field, and they would have already put these small square bales on the ground, and I would pick them up, throw them up on the trailer, and then we would take all the hay and put it in the barn and stack the hay in the barn. That was another great summer job because you got paid pretty good, at least for back then, and it was a great workout. So somebody getting ready to play high school football and everything, that was like the premier summer job to get.
I was going to say that kind of sounds like it would be a good workout lifting those
Oh, I
heavy
love it.
bales.
I wish I could go do it today. I look around. I go right around looking for small hay bales all over the place up there.
Lifting up the heavy bales of hay definitely sounds like it was a good workout. And I
Yeah.
want to hear from you. What was it like being a part of the soybean festival? Did you guys used to attend this soybean festival? You had mentioned that it was something that happens every August in
Every
Missouri.
first weekend in August every year. I mean, this past year it didn't happen because of COVID, but I go back every year for it. I brought my kids back there. It started back in 1982. They have it's like usually like a 3 day party kind of because that's kind of the dead time for the farmers because they're just waiting for their crops to grow and ripen. But it was kind of a celebration to celebrate the area and the impact that growing soybeans had on Missouri's agriculture. They turned like the town of Norborne into like an outdoor like country festival. They had stages that they would have like bands at night, and then always on Saturday night of the festival they'd have a parade on Saturday. They would crown a king soybean, and then on Saturday night they have they call it the homegrown hometown ha ha show, where all the locals that were kind of into acting and performing, they would put on like a talent show for the community, sell tickets to it, a little bit of a fundraiser. I participated in the haha show my senior year in high school. My dad was a longtime MC of the haha show from like 1982 to like 2000. It's very heavily involved in the community back then.
So it sounds like the soybean festival is the place to check out in the summer when you're in Missouri.
We'll go through a lot of Budweiser and Bud Light that weekend.
And I understand you are the youngest of 5 kids. So what was it like growing up in such a big family in such a small town? And again, I love that your mom and dad, they were together for such a long time up until they passed away, unfortunately. Yep. But it sounds like they lived a really great life in that farm country. But what was it like growing up with such a big family, with all of your siblings in Missouri?
3 sisters and a brother, and they were, I was the youngest of 5, but then my nearest sibling was my sister, and she was 5 years older than me. And then beyond that, my next was 8 years older than me, then 11 years older than me, then 12 years older than me. And so if you kind of look at that scattering of ages, I think my mom told me I was an accident.
Oh gosh.
She said it was the best mistake she ever made. Having a big family was a lot of fun growing up. I was a spoiled, since I was the youngest, I was spoiled to death, and I loved every minute of it. And I got to grow up watching my older brother play high school football and wrestled, and my sisters all played sports and did cheerleading. So by the time I got up there, I just kind of was groomed into playing football, playing sports, the whole works. Everybody just kind of knew our family because of how long, we've been kind of kicking around there.
So it sounds like you guys had a really tight-knit family unit. I love that your dad, as you mentioned previously, owned his own gas and diesel delivery business, which is super amazing. And your mom was actually a teacher.
Yep.
What your favorite holiday as a kid was Christmas? Naturally, I feel like a lot of kids love Christmas when they're younger, but you also enjoyed Thanksgiving. Why did you enjoy both those holidays so much when you were a kid up until your teens?
I think it's a normal progression that once you don't believe in, I don't know if any kids are watching this, but once you don't believe in Santa Claus anymore, then fascination with Christmas kind of starts to wane. It starts to wane a little bit, and as you get older, the presents and the material stuff doesn't mean as much to you, and then at that point, eating is always important, and Thanksgiving kind of takes over, I think, at that point, because football was always a big part of Thanksgiving. Not like it is out here in Massachusetts, where Massachusetts, they have the whole Thanksgiving Day high school football games, which I learned about later in life. But out there, there was no high school football except for state championships for that weekend. But it was more about watching the NFL games after you've had Thanksgiving dinner. That just became like the holiday, because like I said, it just the pressure of buying gifts and all that stuff wasn't there. It was just all about being with your family and being thankful for all the blessings that God has given you.
It sounds like you guys clearly love your football, and we're going to be speaking about that shortly. You guys are now listening to Max Lane. He's actually a New England Patriots alumni. So please, guys, stay tuned. We're going to be talking all about the NFL, playing with Drew Bledsoe, his idols, Joe Montana and Howie Long. So please stick with us. But before we get into that, we need to hear a little bit more about you growing up. We need to know why the heck Max Lane is the way that he is. How did he turn into the incredible adult man that he is now? And you can't learn about any of that unless you hear about your family life, where you grew up, and vacationing. So I understand you guys loved to vacation when you were a family. Where did you guys like to go? And then also, I need to hear about this ski colliding trip that happened to you and your dad. There's like some type of a ski colliding accident or story of some sort.
Places that we vacationed were, I don't know if you ever heard of the Lake of the Ozarks. Actually, you probably heard of Ozark, right? The show Ozark.
Correct, I have.
Actually, like going to the, that's in Missouri, by the way, and in South Missouri, and that was a very popular vacation spot for me growing up because it was an easy drive. Our families, a lot of families that my folks that we were all friends with would all get like rent cabins down there and go for like a week in the summertime. And so that was a place that we went quite a bit as a young kid. As we got older, my parents' friends, some of my parents' friends had condos out in Colorado, and they introduced my parents to skiing. I was in like second grade, third grade, and my parents went out skiing with their friends, and they came back and were like, we got to take the kids out there. So they loaded us up, took us out of school, which wasn't that big of a deal back then. And we went out to Colorado 2 years in a row to go skiing. And I think it was the first year that I was out there. You know, if you can imagine, I mean, a second grader and a third grader, first time skiing, first time dealing with ski boots and skis and poles. I mean, it was just, it would have been horrible for my parents to deal with. I can't imagine what they, because I remember, crying because my boots were too tight or they didn't fit right and all that stuff. And
needless to say, did you ever go skiing ever again after this one ski trip?
Well, I did. No, I didn't go until I was an adult. Now I love it. And I brought my kids up the Sunday River to learn how to ski, but I didn't try to teach them. I sent them to ski school. That's what my folks should have done with me.
There we go.
But anyway, this one time, after I kind of could get down the mountain a little bit, my dad and I were coming down this trail, and I thought, I was on the left of him, and I thought we were going towards the right trail, and he thought we were going towards the left trail, and we just went and collided like right into each other. Skis came off. Fortunately, neither of us were hurt, but I'm sure my dad was just like, oh no, what's going to happen now? Is he going to start crying again? I'm sure that's what he was thinking. We got up and made it on down the hill.
I kind of like that one though, because it shows like how close you and your dad are. Obviously, if you remember that story from second grade, definitely was ingrained in your mind. It sounds like the skis kind of hurting your feet a little bit and it being cold and you kind of colliding with your dad definitely stuck out in your memory, which is pretty cool, I guess. And I'm glad that you guys still enjoy going skiing now. And it sounds like you take your kids fairly often. Again, guys, you are now listening to Max Lane, New England Patriots alumni. Please stick with us. But before we continue, I need to pop up this phone number because you guys know we are all about green team junk removal. Please give them a call at 508-361-0519. Again, guys, 508-361-0519. The owner is actually a really good friend of mine, Fred Cullen. He's amazing. He's actually located in the Massachusetts area. If you guys need any junk removed, whether it be an unwanted TV, microwave, big couch that you no longer need, please give him a call. He will, in an eco-friendly way, dispose of those items. It will not end up in a landfill. And actually, believe it or not, a lot of the items he actually donates to Habitat for Humanity and a lot of other charities. So please give Green Team Junk Removal a phone call at 508-361-0519. But let's jump back into this interview with you. So again, guys, you are now listening to Max Lane. We've been talking all about the fact that he grew up in a really small town in Missouri. very well known for soybeans and farmland. We just discussed a little bit about the fact that him and his parents are very close, and he was the youngest of 5 growing up in his family. He really enjoyed Christmas as a kid, loved Thanksgiving, enjoyed his family, really loves football, of course. I understand you were really into, obviously, youth sports as a kid. You actually played baseball as a child. I wanted to ask you, what position did you play while playing baseball, and what sparked your interest in that particular sport when you were younger?
Well, I mean, out there, we didn't have Pop Warner football. We didn't have a lot I mean, the only really summer sport that we had that you could play was baseball. So that was kind of why I started out playing summer baseball. And I mean, I was horrible at it. I couldn't hit the ball worth a darn. Let's see. You asked where at what position? You know, I would say left out, but that's not.
Oh my gosh!
But no. But the next position beyond, better than left out was right field. So I think that's where I ended up starting. And until I got a little bit better, a little bit more athletic. And I could make it to first base without tripping. I got a little bit better by the time I was done playing. I probably stopped playing when I was in like 6th or 7th grade, whenever, because that's about the time when you could start playing football. Out where I grew up, like my first year of organized football was in 8th grade, and then the next sport. I mean, I played basketball, so junior high basketball when I was in 7th grade. The day that I got released for my hernia, I was playing with some kids, like roughhousing after one of the high school football games, and I broke my wrist, and I couldn't play junior high basketball either, 7th grade, because of my wrist being broken. So I had a slow start to sports as a kid, but 8th grade it all started happening.
So in 8th grade, it all started coming together. Obviously, it doesn't sound like you enjoyed your time playing baseball that much, but at least it got your athletic juices flowing a little bit. And
Yeah.
I love that you started really heavily getting into the sport of football, both in junior high and also high school. I think you are a little bit influenced in the sport of football because your brother was a high school all-state quarterback. And football, as you mentioned earlier, was a huge part of your hometown growing up. And you actually mentioned it as a community affair. So what was it like playing football in junior high and having your brother be somebody that you actually looked up to playing the sport?
Yeah, it was awesome. It was, my dad, my whole family, my mom, my dad were all big football fans. My dad had played high school football for the same high school. Like I said, it was a community affair. Why I say it like that was back there, and I think it's still like that out in the Midwest, is that you don't have to have kids on the program or on the team to go watch the game. Like, out here, I noticed that if you don't have kids that are on the team, you don't go see the games, which it's just weird to me, because to me, like growing up, like we had people that didn't have kids, but they still want to come see the hometown team play the rival and support the team. Like now out here, it's like you kind of get looked at as like a creep or something. It's like, like, well, why are you at the game? You don't have any kids on the team. Because I like high school sports. I like watching competition. That's kind of it's a different feel out here compared to where I grew up.
I love that. And your brother sort of influenced you a little bit as well. Talk a little bit about the fact that your brother influenced you. And again, I know you already discussed the fact that it was such a huge community affair. And I will actually attest to that. Obviously, I grew up in Massachusetts. I obviously attended those high school games while I was in high school. But yeah, nowadays, I feel like people don't really support their high school teams or even their college teams that much up north. It's more so we're all about our professional sports teams.
Yeah.
Interesting, because it's true, because my boyfriend is actually from the South, grew up in North Carolina, and he and I had a whole talk when we first started dating about the fact that down here in the South, they're more so about like their college sports because they didn't really have that many pro sports in the 90s and the early 2000s. So I think going off of what you're mentioning as well, it kind of sounds like the same type of idea that you guys have the community, you guys like following maybe your high school and college sports. And if you have a pro team, cool. And if you don't, you're still going to be involved with sports one way or the other.
Yeah, I think it's also a factor of like, out in the Midwest and out places like that, small towns, like sports was kind of like their social life. It was a part of their social life, whereas out here you've got, people go up to the mountains, people go to Boston, people go to Cape Cod, all that. They have all these other activities that, when parents have kids, they're like, oh, we got to get through this just so we can get back to going to Cape Cod. That's what it seems like. It's just like, and that's why other people, when you see people that don't have kids and they're at the game, you're like, why are you here?
But I guess the main thing was I kind of wanted to know, like, how your brother how did your brother influence you? Again, he was an all-state quarterback.
He was 10 or 11 years older than me. So, when he was at, 16, I was kind of, I was sick, 5 or 6 years old. And, when your brother was, to me, he was larger than life. The high school quarterback, 6'3", 205. And I was just this little, 5 or 6 year old that just loved going to games. And they won games and all that. And he was kind of a little bit of a, I don't know, a legend. So like probably as a kid, I probably wanted to be a quarterback because he was a quarterback. As time went on, I kind of, my body grew to a point where I wasn't going to be a quarterback. So it's a natural influence, from that point on.
It's incredible that your brother was actually one of the people that influenced you into the sport. And speaking of quarterbacks and people that influenced you into the sport of football, you as a kid and into your teens, maybe even currently, obviously they're retired now, you idolized and you loved watching both Joe Montana and Howie Long. And for those of you that are listening who maybe, I don't know how you don't know who Joe Montana is, but listen up if you don't. Joe Montana and Howie Long. Joe Cool is actually one of Joe Montana's nicknames. He played 13 of his 15 years in the NFL with the San Francisco 49ers. He won 4 Super Bowls as a starting quarterback. And also Howie Long is 6'5", holy crap, pretty tall. Yeah. And he retired recently. Well, not that recent because I think he actually is a on-camera personality now, but he was an NFL defensive end and he spent 13 seasons with the Oakland Raiders franchise.
And Howie Long is a native Massachusetts kid.
That is super cool. I did not know that.
He grew up in Charlestown and he went to Milford High School.
Super cool. I actually did not know that. I do actually see him on air sometimes. I know he is an on-air personality currently.
Yeah, he's on Fox. Yeah, he's on Fox.
How did watching these gentlemen influence you as a kid and into a young adult and want to spark you into playing football even more?
My hometown where Norborne was about an hour and a half hour east of Kansas City, Missouri, right? So we had the Kansas City Chiefs were around back then, but they weren't very good. And also back then, like, current NFL players didn't go so far out of their cities like they do now. They're just the access to them. It wasn't that, no social media, no camera phones, all that stuff. So you didn't really I didn't really have any interaction with the Chiefs themselves. And then the other thing is since they weren't good, their games were not on to TV every week because they didn't sell out. So, we would end up getting, back then you only had like 3 channels, ABC, NBC, CBS, maybe a couple local TV channels, but, on your furniture style TV, you didn't have access to all the games and all the teams like you do now. So the teams that were, I was born in 71. So in the 70s, the Steelers were really good. And so I grew up being a Steelers fan as a kid. And then in the 80s, that's when the 49ers rose to prominence and became like their own dynasty. And, in 1980, 81, I was 9, 10 years old you really start getting into football at that age, and understanding who the players are and following who's winning, who's losing, who's going to the playoffs, who's going to the Pro Bowl, watching Monday Night Football highlights before you have to go to bed. At that point, that's when Joe Montana was quarterback for the 49ers. I think they won their first Super Bowl with him in '81, which would have put me like right around 10 years old. And then throughout the '80s, he was like the quarterback. And along with that, Howie Long was kind of one of the prominent defensive players for the Raiders in the league. And there was just something about the way he played that I love watching him play. That even influenced me in high school. I played offensive and defensive lineman, and in my junior year, I was a lineman. All the other freshman, sophomore, and senior year, I was a tight end on offense. But my junior year, I was a tackle, and so I was able to get I got 75 as my number because that was Howie Long's number. I mean, I had posters of Joe Montana and Howie Long in my bedroom.
Oh, wow. Oh, my gosh. I'm so happy that I asked that question because I love hearing kind of how a pro athlete gets influence into certain sports. And it's so cool to hear that you went from having these guys essentially hung up in your bedroom, watching them on TV, and then here you are years later. Obviously, you're retired now, but being able to play in the NFL yourself must have been such a freaking dream come true.
I got to meet Joe Montana. In '94, he was playing for, he said 13 out of 15 years he played for the 49ers. Well, he finished his last 2 years with the Chiefs. In the offseason after my rookie year, you had the opportunity to do appearances and whatnot. And one of the appearances I got to do was me and another teammate of mine, this guy, Marty Moore, who was a rookie along with me. We went and did this. It's called a cutting horse competition down in Fort Worth, Texas. Current guy played for the Cowboys. This guy, Jay Novacek, put on this cutting horse competition. Invited, guys that wanted to go down there and do it. And they had owners of these cutting horses. And these are very specifically trained horses that in its practical use are these horses would be like, say, out on a ranch, and they'd have a herd of cattle, and they needed to get one of the cows cut away from the herd so they could, because it was sick, and they had to go in and cut it, find it and cut it and cut it away from the herd and get it away so they could vaccinate it. So they had these competitions on these horses where you actually ride into a herd of cattle, find one, try to get one.
Was Joe Montana there too?
And Joe Montana is a huge cutting horse guy. And so he was there. And I stuck my hand out when he was kind of hanging out there talking, and I was like,
I was gonna say, were you starstruck or what?
I don't think I even knew how to speak. I was like, hi.
So this is your rookie year. You happen to go somewhere in Texas with one of your buddies. Obviously, you guys are both probably brand new to the team. Oh, yeah. Joe Montana happens to be there. You're starstruck. Don't even know what to say. But I think that's super cool that you're able to essentially meet your idol. It's like full 360. Here you are meeting your idol.
I don't think I told him that his poster was in my bedroom, though. I don't think I told him that part. Honestly, it was probably still up in my bedroom at my folks' house. That's what.
I love that. I'm so happy that I actually asked that question. I think it's super cute, and it's going to make a really good soundbite for this podcast. I want to switch on over a little bit. We're going to continue to talk about football. You guys are now listening to Max Lane. He's actually a New England Patriots alumni. So you guys are getting to listen to us talk about all of the oldie football players, like the oldie but goodies, like Drew Bledsoe, Howie Long, like you name them, we're talking about them tonight. Joe Montana, here we are. Let's hop right into it. I want to talk a little bit about the fact that you went to prep school in New England in Newport, Rhode Island. So you actually
Yeah.
went there for, I think, a year for prep school for the Navy, correct? What was that whole experience like living in Newport, Rhode Island and going to prep school?
I'll give you a little background on how I ended up there and why I chose going to the Naval Academy. In high school, the service academies, because back then they were kind of at a disadvantage, just because of all the application process and the admissions process that it takes to get into a school like that. They were allowed to, back then, high school recruiting, college football recruiting was so much different than it is now. You didn't even talk to teams until after your senior football season. I mean, they could come and watch you play, but you didn't talk to them, outside of, like, if you went to a football camp, you could do that. But other than that, they didn't call you until after your senior football season. And but service academies had, because of the way they were and the way they operated, they could recruit earlier. They could actually, so they sent out these like 3x5 cards to every high school coach in the country and said, what juniors on your team would you think could play Division I football and would consider going to the United States Naval Academy? And my head coach, my football coach, sent back my name. So Navy, in March of my junior year, sent out a football coach, whoever recruited my area, and came and visited me and said, are you, we don't know if we want you yet, but if you have any interest in the Naval Academy, you should start the application process now. And my dad was, he served in the Navy in the Korean War for 4 years as an enlisted man. So he was, very excited about that. At that point, I had no aspirations, no real aspirations of playing football beyond for the pros. Like, all I cared about back then was just playing 1 year at a time. Like, when I was in 8th grade, I liked playing football. So I said, okay, I want to keep on playing in high school. And then when I got into high school and it kept on going and I got better, I was like, oh, you know what? I think I would like to play in college, and it was just like that type of progression for me. So whenever Navy started recruiting me, then it's in the summer between my junior and senior year, the University of Missouri offered me a full ride. So I had that interest coming and everything, but Navy kind of always interested me because, it was a great education. I knew that. I knew it was a guaranteed job. If you graduate from there, you had a guaranteed job coming out of college because you were going into the Navy as an officer. And then the other factor, which kind of grew more as I went through my senior year in football and got better, was starting to get more attention from other schools and everything, was the one school that never gave me even a sniff was Notre Dame. And I was a big Notre Dame fan in high school, like, out in the Midwest in the late 80s, Notre Dame football was everything. And I loved watching them on Saturdays. And whenever they didn't give me any kind of a sniff, nothing, no letter, anything, I realized that Navy played Notre Dame every year. And I thought, wow, okay, if I can't play with them, next best thing would be to play against them. And so that was probably another big factor why I chose to go to Navy. And then when I did, my pure love for Notre Dame turned into pure hatred. Because I heck with those guys. They didn't want me. I'm going to, every time we played them, I got up for that game so much. And I wanted to show them that, they should have, but, they probably really didn't even, they probably still didn't know who I was. But anyway, but that was motivation for me.
I do love that you had the motivation because you really wanted to play with Notre Dame. However, they, like you said, maybe they didn't know who you were, or they didn't have spots on their roster, or whatever the case may be. You obviously had a great time playing for the U.S. Naval Academy. And I wanted to whip out some of your stats here, actually. So it looks like you were a 3-year starter at offensive tackle for the Navy. You finished your collegiate career with 32 consecutive starts.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to ask you, obviously, what was your most memorable moment playing for the U.S. Naval Academy? And again, you obviously got that prep school start in Newport, Rhode Island. You went from there, hopped on over to the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis, Maryland. And what was that whole experience like?
Oh, it was. I mean, it was great going to prep school. So, probably since I was coming from a really small town, and they kind of used the prep school as I think a way to kind of redshirt because you couldn't redshirt there. So I think it was a way for them to develop guys a little more. They probably thought I was a little green. Probably thought I needed to um, get a little bit more work academically before going into the Naval Academy. I went there, and some of my best friends that I went through the Naval Academy with and played with are from. We all went to that prep school because they had a football team also, and that year our prep school football team went 10-0 and killed everybody. I mean, like Mass Maritime, we played them. That was our first game. We played the Naval Academy junior varsity team twice. We beat them. We beat Army's prep school team. I mean, we had so much fun playing football that year and just killed everybody. Another great thing about going to that prep school is you were considered an enlisted guy, so we actually got paid. And so you could only go out on weekends. You had liberty on weekends. So you couldn't go out during the week, but we were getting paid. Back it doesn't sound like much now, but back then we would get paid $800 a month or $850 a month. We'd be released into Newport on weekends, and we just had a ball. So that was a great year. Going down to the Naval Academy, things are a little bit different. It was harder going into your plebe year. Your plebe year, it's like, which is your freshman year, is your plebe year, and you are just treated like it's, like it's like boot camp, but worse. Maybe not worse, but just you get hazed. It's probably softened up a little bit over the years. It was just a really tough year, and I played football, but I really didn't get to play a lot, even on the JV team. I had a break my sophomore year. Our starting like left tackle, either I think he got hurt or he just didn't do very well in the first game, and then they promoted me up to starting the second game my sophomore year, and we were playing against the University of Virginia. And University of Virginia had an All-American defensive end that I was going to be playing against on my first start, and his name was Chris Slade, who I ended up being teammates with up here, 3 years later up in New England. My first start against him, I did okay. Wasn't great, but I did okay. Held my own. But then, yeah, the whole Notre Dame. And then, when it came time to play Notre Dame, that game was always on national television. My dad, back in my hometown, rented at the local bar. There's only one bar in my hometown. It's called the Hitchin Post. My dad rented back then before bars were having big screen TVs and everything, especially out in my hometown. My dad rented a big screen TV for the bar and had a party at the Hitchin Post for the Notre Dame game, because that was like my first game on national television. So the whole town came up and to watch, and I went offsides on the first play from scrimmage.
Oh gosh, so your dad had everybody watching and then you go offsides. What was his reaction like right off the bat? Did he call you after and be like, "Son, what was going on there?"
Well, one thing that he told me was that afterward, I think I called him after every game, at least, or maybe when I got back or the day after, because we didn't have cell phones. Whenever I jumped off sides, he got up and said, "Wait a minute," and he goes, "Max just wanted to get his name on TV. That's why he did that." So he always had a way of kind of, saying the right thing at the right time.
Super cute. I love how close, again, you and your dad are. Going back to that story of you guys skiing and growing up in the small town in Missouri, and obviously you playing college football. It sounds like he loved getting everybody together to watch you play. And I know that was kind of like a funny story. So I wanted to ask you if you had any other funny team stories, like whether it be a travel story with you and your team or something that might have happened in the locker room that you guys used to like joke around about. any funny stories from when you were playing college football?
Hold on. I remember one. I think this is the one you're wanting me to talk about. My senior year, we were playing Notre Dame, and Notre Dame was ranked, like 1 or 2 in the country. And, we were horrible. Like my freshman year, we were 5-6. My sophomore year, we were 1-10, but we beat Army. My junior year, we were 1-10, beat Tulane, lost to Army. And then my senior year, we actually started out the year pretty good. We were like 4-2 going into Notre Dame. We were 4-2, still not getting. I mean, we hadn't, we weren't getting any respect, which, we didn't really deserve it at that point. And Notre Dame was like 1 or 2 in the country. They just beaten Florida State the week before, and we were playing them at Veterans Stadium down in Philadelphia. But we were beating them at halftime. And I think we were beating them like 17-10 or 17-7 or something like that. And I just remember sitting in the locker room at halftime, and everybody was always. I was more, I mean, I got fired up, but I also was would get inside myself and think about what I need to do for the second half and think about my game, and I was always more of a technique, footwork, hand placement. And so I was sitting there, and everybody else is getting all fired up and everything because we're winning. And I just remember sitting there thinking, I was like, man, God, could you just strike us down right now and strike us down with some lightning so we can, call this game right now? Because I knew what was going to happen in that second half. And sure enough, I think they ended up beating us 52-28 or something like that. It was we ended up getting killed in the second half, but I just remember, thinking oh, just stop the game right now.
You wanted like a mercy rule at that point. You're like, no, please, I can't do this anymore. We need a mercy rule.
I wanted something to happen just to stop the game right now and have it left that we won the game, because I knew that they were going to come back in the second half.
Last question, and then we're going to switch on over to pro football. My boyfriend actually wanted me to ask this question, believe it or not. He wanted me to ask you, having so much experience working alongside the Navy and obviously playing college football and going through all that boot camp, did it help you prepare for the NFL? And what was your mindset like from being along with the Navy for so long?
I think, it prepared me specifically for the team that I ended up being drafted by, which was New England. Back then, New England had, Bill Parcells was the coach, and he was, disciplinarian. You show up on time for meetings. 5 minutes early is considered on time, and it's a lot of the principles that he kind of expected, and the behavior and the character and everything that he expected from his players and his teams. That was just second nature to me from being brought up in such a, and gone to school at such a disciplined school, disciplined program, the whole thing. So whenever I got drafted by New England, and, people say, "Oh, Parcells, he's a hard coach." And, of course I was scared coming in as a rookie,